Oh, we got a good one this week, folks. Graeme Watt, that's Graeme spelled Graeme, who's principal and lead strategist at Anthem Creative. He's going to talk about the power of storytelling, the reason you need to have a digital strategy, and wait till you hear his story on artificial intelligence, AI. It's going to blow your mind away. So please, I hope you enjoy this interview with Graeme. Hey, did you know that we have a YouTube channel with all these podcasts and video? You get to see what's going on, what we look like when we're doing these podcasts. So if you'd like to go take a look, it's youtube.com/@thecorley-company. We'll see you there. Folks, you're going to love this one. This is going to be a very interesting interview. Graeme is quite progressive in the field of nonprofits and digital fundraising, among other things. But before we jump into that, Graeme, if you would just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your very interesting background, your career, and your involvement in nonprofits.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to have this conversation. I love interacting with boards and just kind of sharing knowledge and educating on the things that we're thinking about and dreaming about. I never grew up dreaming of, being in the nonprofit space. It wasn't something that I was thinking about, but I had a very unusual childhood. I grew up all over the world, lived in 3 continents by the time I was 12, been to 24 countries, spoke 3 languages. And I had this sense that the world was this big, bold, beautiful, yet broken place. And some of my earliest memories are running around in the jungles of DR Congo as a kid. And so I grew up with this very global perspective and saw a lot of poverty and suffering early on. So that's really shaped me as a human being. Obviously, it's hard not to. I went to university and studied ecotourism and outdoor leadership. So I don't even really know what that is, but I'm certified to play outside with people is what I understand that to mean. Effectively, that kind of led to a big transition. And there were some really significant things that happened in my life that turned me down a different track. And I ended up finding myself really wanting to invest in, seeing other human beings thrive. And so I found myself, starting where I knew that I had some influence and doing some youth work with some teenagers here in Canada where I live. And I created an 8-week-long experiment with a group of students with the intention of helping them to be more globally minded, help to understand how their unique gifts and talents and skills and time and energy could be used to impact the lives of people who are suffering halfway around the world. And so this 8-week-long experiment just kind of took on a life of its own. It became something I had never anticipated. And at 26 years old, I found myself quitting my job and starting a nonprofit from my living room. And I'll never forget the day where, I no longer was getting a paycheck from a regular job, and I was sitting in my living room with my laptop open, Googling how to start a nonprofit organization. And, as a 20-something, I just had no clue what I was getting myself into. So, I spent the next 7 years learning how to build an organization and build a board and, work with a board and how to fundraise and how to build a team. And, that organization became a national nonprofit organization. It was a grassroots youth engagement organization. And the work that we were doing was really innovative. This is where I really, wet my beak on all things digital. And we were engaging students. And at the time, Facebook was kind of all the rage. So I learned the power of digital storytelling to engage audiences and to fundraise. I learned, how to build websites and do all of those things and really build a movement on the back of social media. And, fast forward a couple of years later, we caught the attention of World Vision here in Canada. They saw what we were doing as this grassroots movement that was growing quickly, and they were trying to figure out how to engage students in a new way in a digital world. And as a large organization, they were struggling to figure out how to do that. So we ended up merging our organization, what we were doing, into World Vision. I was kind of seduced by the larger platform, not having to fundraise anymore. And so one of my mentors, he says, it's like going from the Zodiac to the aircraft carrier. So I had a staff team of 7, and we were very nimble. We could get in our team meeting, make a decision, and action that the next week. And then all of a sudden I was in one of the largest NGOs on the planet and just kind of learned, the mechanics of doing that. Ultimately, my knack for digital storytelling and thinking outside of the box and using digital in creative ways got me in trouble at World Vision. And so they ended up dragging me kicking and screaming into the branding and marketing side of World Vision. I didn't really know anything about that world, but all of a sudden I found myself leading some of those efforts and, doing a lot of copywriting and helping the organization figure out how to tell its story in a digital first world. So that was kind of my nonprofit experience. The light bulb went on for me when I realized that World Vision was one of the largest, best resourced organizations in the world. And they were the envy of everybody else, but they were struggling to figure out how to tell their story in a digital first world. And I started asking myself the question, I wonder if that's true of other organizations. I wonder if smaller organizations that are maybe not as well resourced as World Vision were having similar problems. So I started calling my friends who were executive directors of smaller orgs and saying, hey, are you struggling to figure out how to navigate social media and digital and how to fundraise in a digital environment? And the answer was a resounding yes. And so my brother and I put our heads together and we created Anthem Creative, which is a full service digital agency that serves the nonprofit sector. So it's been 10 years now. We've served, a couple hundred nonprofit organizations of all shapes and sizes all over the world, learned a ton along the way, and we continue to be really passionate about helping organizations pursuing human flourishing do a better job of telling their story online.
And so what a fantastic background. And so the digital thing, and I'm using that term intentionally. So when you say digital, what do you mean? What does digital mean nowadays?
That's a really great question. I mean, the lines are getting so blurred between what is analog and what is real and what is digital, especially for younger people. I think digital is really just the whole realm of anything that's constitute online engagement. So digital is this kind of connective layer of the internet that we all live in. More and more digital is morphing towards, the time we spend in our smartphones and the handful of apps that we spend so much of our time in. It's also just the way that we work. What we're doing right now, this is a digital interaction. And so much of our world, post-pandemic has gone to Zoom. And, so many now teams have just gone fully remote. There's, offices that have, basically chosen not to do in person anymore. So more and more of our world is moving towards digital. And digital is just that kind of connective layer of the internet that, whether we interact with commerce, whether we interact with one another, whether we interact with our kids' schools, all of that is in the digital realm.
And so because of that, nonprofits really need to have a digital strategy. And so that's the whole reason, the existence for your organization. So how do you help a nonprofit develop, understand the importance of a digital strategy?
That I think depends a lot on the organization and what their mandate is, the level of sophistication of their leadership, the appetite for digital from their board. A lot of times you have organizations that are very resistant, and let's face it, the nonprofit sector doesn't tend to be known for its, early adoption and innovation either. And so we've often found, when we first started Anthem 10 years ago, we were having this conversation around, should nonprofits use social media? Is it something that nonprofits should do? And now it's basically you absolutely have to be present on social media as a nonprofit organization if you want to be relevant. And now with the advancing of emerging technologies, this is becoming more and more true. But here's one of the ways that I engage with leadership teams and boards around this idea of digital and should we go digital. I usually ask a progression of questions. So, is the world today more digital than it was yesterday? And if the answer is yes, then I think digital is really important. Now, will tomorrow be more digital than the world is today? And if the answer to that is yes, then we should probably lean into digital a little bit more. Now, this is where it gets really interesting is the adoption curve and the rate of adoption of digital technology, including the rapid onslaught of AI and other things, is that accelerating or is it slowing down? It's accelerating faster than anything that we've ever seen. And so digital continues to emerge as this thing that, is probably going to be more important in the future than it is today. And I think the last question that I ask is that likely to change? Is that trend likely to reverse? And I think the answer is we're not putting the genie back in the bottle. And when we're, looking at the way that the world has fully embraced digital, that is going to continue to usher in a more and more digital future. And I really fundamentally believe that organizations that are not thinking about digital and leaning into it heavily absolutely should. In fact, we're seeing more and more of our clients who are now raising more through digital than traditional channels. And this is something we're seeing that's fairly common. I just had a meeting with the vice president of development of an organization here in Canada that's raising about $75 million a year. And for the first time in their almost 20-year history, their digital fundraising has exceeded their traditional. And so that is a trend that I don't think is going to slow down. I think there's so many factors leading into that. But I absolutely think that it's no longer an option for nonprofits whether or not they're going to embrace digital.
And so in that example, with that client getting more funding through digital. I assume you're seeing that everywhere. And why is that?
Well, I think one of the ways that you could enter that conversation is by just looking at the amount of time spent on smartphones. And I just was doing this research a couple of days ago. So we're actually partnering with a tech company out of Idaho right now to bring a completely new way of doing digital storytelling to the nonprofit sector through mobile phones. And this is like very, cutting edge innovation. We're taking this technology that's been developed for the medical sector. I saw a fundraising application and use cases for it. So we're now partnering with them to bring our digital storytelling expertise and their technology to the nonprofit sector. But the whole idea there, as we were looking at it, is the average amount of time spent daily on smartphones from individuals 18 or older across North America is between 4 and 5 hours per day. Now, you would think that based on demographic, that would swing majorly, but it actually doesn't. You do see in Gen Z in particular, that usage ramps up to about 6 hours to 7 hours per day. But even as you go into millennials and Gen X and boomers, you're still seeing smartphone usage to the tune of 4 to 5 hours on average per day.
So if you're raising money, go where the funders are, right? Where the money is, and you get access to them digitally.
The formula doesn't change, right? And this is what I was saying to one of our clients a couple of days ago. 50 years ago, the same formula and strategy was there for fundraising. You first need to get the attention of someone who is sympathetic to your cause. Then you translate that attention into engagement. Then that engagement translates into action. Then you nurture that action into a relationship that is, hopefully a long-standing one. And you then provide deeper opportunities for those individuals to get involved in the work that you're doing. So the what is the same as it's always been, and predominantly because it's still human to human interaction, right? It is still deeply human at its core, but it's just a how that has changed. And it's really just human behavior that is shifted. And it just so happens that now human behavior is shifting in a really rapid, considerable way towards these things. And that's true of my parents who are now in their mid-70s. It's true of me and my wife in our 40s and all of our peers. We're fighting this battle with our kids, right? So you have this reality now. And look, I'm not naive to the fact that, there are many days where I want to close my eyes and go back to a simpler world where, kids just ran outside and climbed trees. And that was our biggest concern. But I think to put our heads in the sand and not realize that this trend is going to continue to march forward, the organizations that are positioning themselves to really engage, and nurture and convert people using smartphones and digital channels, they're the ones that are really going to thrive in the long run.
So, several questions. This is good stuff. Storytelling. That's why your organization exists. Can you just talk a little bit how really important that is in this day and age for nonprofits? Because I see a lot that just don't invest in it or still don't understand its importance.
Where to start? Let me go back to when I started my organization when I was 26 years old. I didn't know a thing. I had no clue what I was doing. I was Googling my way through being an executive director. What I did know was that whoever told the best story got the best result. And what I just happened to be really good at was storytelling. And I understood that this digital thing was going to be a big deal. So I started getting really good at doing digital storytelling for a nonprofit cause and context. And that continues to be true. I call storytelling the lifeblood of your fundraising. It is, and the reason for that is, like I said, fundraising is so deeply human. And there are few things more human than storytelling. It is the way that our brains are actually wired. We are hardwired for story. And the best way to engage someone with the work that you do is to tell them a compelling story. And that story needs to have certain mechanics and components to it in order to be effective. But, there are a few things more powerful than a single story of transformation that has been made possible by donors, volunteers of an organization to get someone to care and engage. And, my whole strategy when I was fundraising in my 20s for an organization that I had started and was leading, I just had one story that I would tell. So people would ask me, hey, so what is your organization about? And I would say, let me tell you about Caleb. And so, I didn't go into our mission statement and our vision statement and all the programs and all the things that we're doing. They would say, "Oh, so what is this about?" I would say, "Let me tell you about Caleb." And I would tell them Caleb's story. And by the end of that story, they were going, "That is amazing. How can I help?" And so that's the power of storytelling. There's nothing that does, I think, a better job of engaging, making people care. Because at the end of the day, this is what my fundraising mentors always said to me: people don't give to organizations. They give through organizations to outcomes that they care about. And the best way to make a connection between what a donor or an individual cares about and your mission is to tell them a story.
Oh, very good. I'm glad board members are listening to this. Now, I'm going to tell you about it. You got to listen to this next story. And Graeme knows what I'm going to ask. And we talked about this right before we started recording. And this is crazy. When we talk digital, we're talking AI. What is the future? And you would argue is the present. And I'd say, what is the future in fundraising? Tell that story if you would, Graeme.
Yeah, and maybe I'll start with that. What is the future? How fast is this all coming? I think it's hard to overstate the speed at which the AI wave is coming. And it's hard to overstate the impact that it's going to have. Now, for today's purposes, I won't go into all of that on a societal level. I've got a lot of theories around the importance of nonprofits. I think certain types of organizations are really going to thrive in an AI future. They are going to be more needed than ever. I think there is going to be more wealth creation than we've ever seen, which will then make it, possible for organizations to be funded in new ways and capture new value. But all that aside, I think one of the mistakes that I see a lot of our clients making and board members making as well, and executive directors as well, is assuming that this is 5, 10, 15 years away. And so the story I'm about to tell, yes, it sounds very sci-fi. It sounds like I'm talking about a Star Trek episode or something like that. But this is something that is like already a year old. This happened in 2024. But there's a computer programmer who was experimenting with AI agents. So AI agents are essentially AI tools that are programmed with specific and certain criteria. You can give them a mandate. You can actually kind of program into the AI agent what you want it to care about and the types of activities that you want it to carry out. So these are starting to be used in business contexts and in nonprofits very, very expansively. You can train an AI agent on marketing. You can train it to do finance. You can train it to do all kinds of specific tasks. This individual was experimenting with autonomous AI agents. And so that autonomous piece is like, if you give it a specific mandate, tell it this is why you exist, and then you let it loose on the internet, what happens? What does it do? And so this individual created an experiment where they created an autonomous AI agent that is an orangutan named S.A.N. So S.A.N, that's an acronym. And S.A.N is this autonomous AI agent orangutan. And they let it loose on the internet. And S.A.N went and created its own Twitter account. And the purpose that the creator of S.A.N gave it was to care about the biosphere, was to care about environmental conservation. And so S.A.N creates a Twitter account or an X account and starts tweeting about it, starts doing research about biodiversity, starts engaging with other people who care about that same thing, and starts actually building a community online. And so you could go right now, you can go to X and you can type in S.A.N and you'll find S.A.N, the AI agent orangutan. The reason this gets interesting for nonprofits is that as it started engaging and building a community around this idea of environmental conservation and biodiversity, it actually started fundraising, and it created a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign for an organization called rainforest.org in the States, and was, moderately successful in its efforts, raised about $30,000 through this fundraising campaign. Those funds were then donated to rainforest.org. So Rainforest receives this donation from an AI agent and then sees the interactions on Twitter, sees the community that was donating to the campaign. Rainforest.org starts engaging with S.A.N and they start having a dialogue out in the open, on X. And Rainforest.org, is a very progressive thinking organization, very forward thinking. They saw this as an incredible opportunity to really engage and make history and do something different. And they've now invited S.A.N to be on their board of advisors for Rainforest.org. And S.A.N is continuing to advocate for the organization, continuing to raise funds for the organization. And, beyond that has opened up this whole new base of donors, this whole new community of digital natives that are, trading cryptocurrencies and involved in digital currencies online, who are now getting involved with rainforest.us or .org. So that's just one very extreme case study, but I think that's something that we're going to start seeing more and more of. And, there are lots of projections that are looking at the number of AI agents that will exist on the internet within the next 5 years. And a lot of digital interactions and engagement will be happening through AI agents. So this will become quite common.
Wow, this is absolutely fascinating. And then so take it to a governance level for a second. What will become the responsibility of the nonprofit and the board of directors in situations like this? Can you anticipate?
I mean, it's a little bit of the Wild West right now. Like these aren't the kinds of things that we have really clear policies and bylaws around. I do know some people in this space that are talking about, AI agents making really good board members, and that there may be a world where your boards are split between AI agents and human beings. And just imagine having an AI agent who is your treasurer, and they're responsible for, financial reporting, and, that is better than the best accountant on the planet, right? Like that's the reality of what's possible. So would you rather have a human being who's, late to meetings and maybe isn't available because they're on holidays, as your treasurer, or would you want someone who's, better trained than the best accountant on the planet and who's going to be there every single time and engaged the way that you want them to?
Absolutely.
So these are big questions. They're big questions, and I don't have answers.
No, it is the Wild West. You're absolutely right. But it's interesting. It's fun to think about. When you told me that story, it just absolutely blew me away. So then what is the future? If that's the now, what do you see in the future?
As it results to governance for nonprofit
well, I'm sorry, back to fundraising. Fundraising in digital, and just how nonprofits may employ those tools.
Well, I think, on a practical level, to get, current as well, one of the things that we're looking at is how can nonprofit organizations leverage AI tools in order to increase efficiency? One of the things that AI is currently really good at is automating away low value tasks to then free up the time of your people to focus on higher value activities. I think there are lots of tools, like major donor prospecting. A lot of these things are going to be, easily done by the click of a button. The ability to analyze your donor database and find incredible amounts of value in it, and be able to have an AI that is scanning your donor database and going, hey, these donors here, this list, these are people that we should probably touch base with because I think they're in danger of lapsing. Now, you've been able to do this already for a long time in analyzing your CRM and your donor database, but you pay thousands of dollars to have an analyst go through and do that. And now the ability to, basically invest those resources elsewhere while still benefiting from it is tremendous. And I think, if there's anything that I've experienced as a nonprofit leader and now serving hundreds of nonprofits, it's the same, chronic problem and challenge is resources are thin. Everybody's wearing multiple hats, and, the talent and expertise is not always there in order to accomplish your mission the most effectively as you can. And so I think there's actually incredible promise in AI and in this digital future where nonprofits can actually level the playing field in many ways and be able to automate away the lower value tasks and then be able to focus on higher value activities. And here's my fundamental thesis, not just in nonprofit, but across the board. We're thinking about this as a business. I think the race is to who can become the most human. In an AI digital future where you don't know what you can trust when you see things on the internet and you go, I don't know if that's real anymore. I think the organizations that are really going to thrive are the ones that figure out how to become most human. And this is back to storytelling for me, why we're fully investing in our film studio. Because one of the things that I know is going to become most important is that real human interest, kind of documentary style filmmaking, and telling stories of a real human being, sharing their story, their journey, their struggles, their victories, and doing that in a way that makes an emotional connection with the viewer. I don't think that's going anywhere. And in fact, audiences will not stand for, fake AI generated content from nonprofits like that. So I think that the demand for that is going to increase dramatically. So this is what we're saying to our clients. Investing in digital storytelling is no longer optional. Especially when, the internet is going to start to get flooded with AI content and people won't know what the difference is. They're going to crave things that are real, that are human. And And I think that's one of the opportunities that nonprofits have to stand out in the middle of all of that, is tell really human stories that engage people on an emotional level.
Well, and you shared a little bit about what Anthem Creative does, your organization. And as we're starting to wind down this interview, can you just share a little bit more about what you all do to help nonprofits, and then how people can find you, look you up?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, we've morphed and shifted, and there's been things that we've done more of or less of. Over time, our clients have demanded that we do more rather than less, and so we started specializing in branding and digital storytelling, and then our clients demanded that we started doing websites for them, and so we started doing websites, and we've kind of bolted on services over time. We've really become a full service creative agency. And so the idea there is that we can serve all of a nonprofit's creative needs, whether that is design, whether that is brand work, whether that is messaging and copywriting. One of the things we're really getting into more is capital campaigns. So we love coming alongside an organization that is saying, hey, it's our 50th anniversary and we're trying to raise money to build a new wing on our building. Then we need to raise $15 million. So we come alongside and we help develop the strategy. We help develop all of the creative, and we tell a great story that helps you raise the money. So capital campaigns is another piece of it. Obviously, strategy is a huge component for us as well. So, as maybe your listeners are hearing this and they're going, how do we move and make progress in digital? A huge piece of it for us is, do it strategically. And so we've created this one day strategy sprint where we basically get in the room with your leadership team. Often that will include board members as well. And we develop a 12-month roadmap that is really anchored to what are the organization's most important priorities and what are the things that you're trying to accomplish in the next 12 months. Usually that's through fundraising or through program expansion or development. And then we use this framework that we call strategic inevitability. It's a 4-part framework that we walk our clients through in a one-day session to then develop a 12-month roadmap that is prioritized and that has an action plan built around the things that we believe are going to be the most valuable levers that they can pull to accomplish the goals that they have.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. And you also work with for-profits as well, right? So you do both. And we've been emphasizing nonprofits, but you've got a nice rounded out experience working with for-profit organizations.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a separate side. So Anthem is Anthem Creative, the agency, is very much focused on the nonprofit sector. We also have a film studio, Anthem Studios, and so that's more focused on long-form documentary-style filmmaking, like I was mentioning. We've got a 4-part docuseries on Prime right now in the US that's streaming. So, that's the documentary film side. My brother's now running that. And we do have a portfolio company as well. So, when it comes to digital marketing, we're not just fundraisers. We're not just in the nonprofit space. We've got a handful of partner companies, everything from a direct consumer e-commerce manufacturing company down to a tiny home building company. So we've got a number of companies that we are partners and part owners in. So we're both, nonprofit specialists, but we're also practitioners when it comes to understanding the world of e-commerce and conversion optimization and all of those things. We're able to bring a lot of that knowledge and expertise into the fundraising world and into nonprofits. And so, one of our companies is heavily involved working with influencers and influencer marketing. So we take all of our learnings and lessons from influencer marketing, and we're able to bring it to nonprofits as well. So, and those things work back and forth. We do work with some social enterprises, and a lot of times that's helping them to develop a more robust, social strategy and how they're going to add more cause marketing into the work that they're doing. So that's a little bit more what we do in the cause marketing side of things and the corporate side.
Well, and the clients benefit because you're so well-rounded. That's why I asked the question. I think that's really important because we can't disregard our for-profit brothers and sisters because most of them sit on the boards. And so I think that's really important, and it's a unique
100%.
ability that you all have. So last question as we wrap up, Graeme, if there's a nonprofit board out there debating, grappling with digital strategy, what would you suggest to them?
I would say start small, be strategic, but go all in over the next 24 months. So you don't have to swallow the elephant tomorrow, but I would say start small, be strategic, move intentionally into the space, bring along guides that can help you navigate it well, and then go all in. And the reason I say go all in is that I really believe that your mission requires it of you. If I say this constantly to our clients who are, hesitant or struggling, it's if your mission matters, then so does this. And it really demands it of you. And I think, one of the conversations that we have so often is this idea of engaging younger donors. Our donors are 65 on average is the average age of our donors. And how do we engage their kids? How do we engage millennials? And the answer is digital. And so nonprofits, many of them are now making a transition to their core donor bases being digital immigrants to now digital natives. And there's a fundamental shift in how you need to think and engage. And so that's what I would say. It is now time for organizations to go all in when it comes to their digital strategy. And if you don't know where to start with that, we'd love to have a conversation. That's the world that we live in. And we're very empathetic too. We understand. We sometimes, our director of operations just the other day was saying, it makes me sad. We've lived in this world of digital storytelling for 10 years and it's changing quickly and it makes me sad. So we understand. We're wrestling with it ourselves, and we love to get behind closed doors with EDs and hash it out and go, it's the world is changing and it is what it is, but we need to adapt. And this is where it comes back to the mission for me. If the mission matters, this is required of you.
Yeah, and you're purely mission driven. I've read about you and seen some other podcasts that you've done, and you certainly are. So how does somebody find your organization, Graeme?
The best way to reach us is on our website at anthemcreative.ca. So we are in Canada, so it's .ca, not .com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Graeme Watt. So I'm active there as well. But yeah, our website is the best place to kind of see what we're up to, take a look at some of our case studies and the work that we've done in the past, and easy to reach out. So, yeah, that's probably the easiest thing.
And I will tell you, he spells his name funny. So if you look for him on LinkedIn, it's Graeme, Graeme Watt, spelled that way. And actually, your LinkedIn profile is excellent along with the website. Graeme, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We are better because of it and really appreciate your insight and wisdom.
My pleasure, Michael. Really appreciate the conversation and you having me today.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we have Recapping with Reed. And Reed, I got one word. What? This was crazy. Anyway, 3 takeaways from our interview with Graeme.
First takeaway is that people don't give to organizations, they give through organizations to make an impact on the beneficiaries. I think that's a very good way to think about it and a good way to align your thinking when it comes to digital marketing.
Yeah, he really painted a picture for that. Number 2.
Along those same lines, storytelling, it's the lifeblood of your fundraising. You need to be able to tell a compelling story.
Yeah, and he really painted out the reasons why. And number 3.
The organizations that are positioning themselves to convert people to donors via digital platforms and channels are going to be ahead in the long run. We are getting to a point now where, for many organizations, over 50% of their donations are coming through a digital channel.
Yeah, the future is here, and you better get prepared for it. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Recapping with Reed, and we will I-501 see you next week.